welcome to New Zealand Lawyer TV. For this special episode, we're joined by Paul Sills, an independent mediator and arbitrator who was recently recognised as one of New Zealand lawyers' most influential lawyers. Great to have you here. Paul, you're dedicated to what you describe as the art and science of mediation. So I'd love to start by asking you to tell us more about your background in mediation and arbitration.
So mainly I do commercial work. So my mediation work is typically around commercial disputes. And so I've been doing that for about 12 years now, in sort of addition to my legal practice. And the same with arbitration. Arbitration is typically used for commercial disputes, contractual disputes between parties. It's used a lot in New Zealand in the construction industry. So you'll see a lot of the arbitrators in New Zealand, like myself, have construction law experience, and that's where we do a lot of our work.
Thanks for that, Paul. You've focused on mediation for over 12 years now. What's one thing you've discovered in that time that changed the way you perceived this aspect of dispute resolution?
Interesting question. Really, it's the power of getting the parties together around a table or on the screen, if you have to, in the modern age, to talk through the issues rather than falling back on what I was used to as a barrister: litigation, taking disputes to court, or even taking them into arbitration. So the really key learning is lots of good things can happen if you can get parties around the table and help facilitate a conversation between them.
Okay, thanks, Paul. What are some things you wish more people understood about the process of mediation?
I think commercial parties look at it in slightly the wrong way, if I can put it that way, and that's understandable because it's an education thing. They look at it as them negotiating a dispute, and if they've tried that and it hasn't been successful, they will often question why bother going to mediation. What they don't understand, and we need to educate the market on, is when you add that third person, that facilitator, the head of the table or on the screen, that is helping the parties have the conversation, that is listening and interpreting, asking questions and helping guide the conversation. That's very different from two parties sitting around the table trying to negotiate, or two CEOs on the phone trying to negotiate together. But parties lump them all into the same area and think, well, we had a discussion about this, we couldn't make any headway. What's mediation going to do? So if I could change one thing, I'd like to change many things, but if I could change one, it would be an understanding that a facilitated conversation is much different from a direct conversation a lot of the time.
Thanks, Paul. On that note, I think our audience would benefit from your views on how the legal profession as a whole can drive the adoption of mediation and other alternative dispute resolution methods.
A lot of it starts at the top. What New Zealand does very well, what New Zealand government does very well, is it legislates mediation into a lot of areas of life. So we have quite a number of statutes in New Zealand where mediation is actually either a compulsory part or a key part of dispute resolution. Employment law is a really obvious example. The vast majority of employment disputes first go to mediation with the government ministry that runs it, and so we do that very well. The other big place where you get a lot of direction for mediation is through your justice system, and the encouragement of the justice system to use ADR or use mediation as an effective tool in dealing with disputes. Overseas, United Kingdom, for example, the parties can be directed to go to mediation a lot more frequently. There can be consequences for not going to mediation. We don't quite have that same level in New Zealand, but the active encouragement of the judges to think about it and to encourage parties to try it is really important. And then from the legal profession, it's just, again, that encouragement of their clients to try mediation, and I think try it earlier than we traditionally do. Mediation for many years was always came quite late in the life of a dispute, and often it was done quite close to a trial starting in court. What we're seeing now is a slow shift away, and parties being more willing, with the encouragement of their advisors, lawyers, accountants, etc., to get round the table earlier, which I'm a big fan of. Is as soon as you've got a dispute, as soon as you think that a relationship is in trouble, get round the table and have a conversation about it.
And finally, in your opinion, how has COVID-19 affected the field of mediation and dispute resolution in the past year or so, both in New Zealand and now that you're in the UK there?
That's a good question, because New Zealand is quite different from the rest of the world in this respect, because we've had such a relatively low number of community cases, for example, and our lockdowns have been quite brief compared to, say, the United Kingdom. I'll use as an example. We've seen quite different responses to it. So New Zealand, like everywhere else in the world, when the first lockdown occurred, had to very quickly change its processes. So the courts, for example, were doing a lot of work in how to bring things online, and we all started appearing in court online or on the telephone. But because it was reasonably short-lived, only 4 weeks, we didn't get into the depth of that a lot of the rest of the world has. And it's the same with mediation. So initially people stopped mediating and they said, we'll wait and we'll see. Then when they realized it would carry on for a while and these disputes needed to be resolved, people turned online, so the online platforms like Zoom, and started mediating online. And there was some hesitancy, some reluctance in that, as people, it's really a technology driven thing. How will it be? What will it be like? Mediators were thinking it's not going to be the same as sitting around the table with parties. Parties were thinking it's going to feel artificial, but actually it's worked really well. So New Zealand started down that pathway. We haven't developed our online work as much as the rest of the world. So take America, take the United Kingdom, lots of other places around the world where everything has been done online. So colleagues, mediation colleagues of mine in the UK, since March last year, have done all of their work online. And they are now complete professionals and very comfortable with working on an online platform. And they've found it to be very effective. The success rates of mediation have not really changed because people aren't sitting around a table in person, which has been a really interesting lesson. In New Zealand, we've had a bit more of a hybrid situation where we've done some work online, but we're now doing most of our work back face-to-face around the table. So New Zealand's hasn't had to respond in quite the same way as the rest of the world.
Thank you so much, Paul, and congratulations once again on being crowned one of New Zealand's most influential lawyers. And thank you for watching New Zealand Lawyer TV.